So here we'll start. After the user registers and signs in, these are the main modules at the moment we've got on the top. Configuration data, which is more like your setup. Asset library, which is the library style data of your RCM that you can build in with some unique features that have been built in there that we'll go through. Asset strategy, that's more like your standard RCM at every specific asset level performed. And then we've got task bundling, which is an automated grouping or bundling of your thousands of maintenance tasks. And then we've got single module catalog profile, which is an AI generated with reference algorithms through the CMMS building the failure codes. And it's one of the first in any APM solution available. So we'll start with the configuration data module first. We've got two sections here. One's dashboard, which is currently in development. And this is just basic data that comes from RCM data and builds up in here. And then it shows you just the high level basic costs, risks, and task type, spares, things like that. In the configuration section, we've got labor, where the labor name would be autofilled like a library once your RCM development continues, or you can bring in the data from your other CMMS or APM solutions where you've got them. And the import data has got templates available in there that will help you understand what columns and what data needs to be filled in, and then just drag and drop them or import them in here. Similarly for spares, equipment and tools, and then going through the catalog profile. And this section will be auto-built with standardized codes and names that can be reused and standardized across your entire CMMS database. And otherwise, if your company already has got this, you can always import that, and the software will use the existing codes where it matches within its AI-generated codes process that it's got in the backend. And then we've got these task bundling rules. We'll come to this and set this up once we've loaded in our functional locations. These are basically your standard rules that your maintenance plans and items are built upon. And then we've got the risk metrics again here. I'll build this in prior to make sure everyone's time's being respected. So here you can start with adding your consequences. You can choose from a pre-built list. If it's not there, you can always write something in there, whatever is applicable to your business risk metrics, the consequence types, and you can add them. Once you add them, it's already there. That's why I can. Once you add them, then you can choose whatever you need, and you will find them on the top up here, whatever is chosen. And then in the severity, you can give your names and the values for the severity based on your company risk metrics. And then for every different consequence type, you might have a different description you want to add in. Once you've added that in and save the configuration, then you'll see the numbers coming in there. Likewise, for the likelihood, you can provide the name that your company risk metrics has got with values, and optional any frequencies that you might want to add in, or option for the descriptions that you've got in. Once you've set them up, we have some ISO standard detectability levels that we've included in here. So in this Nexaan software, what we've approached in here is that we've brought in the FAMICA within the RCM. So you no longer do a risk assessment just based on consequence and likelihood. You also have detectability in place to ensure that it can help some engineers to really understand if the detectability is high, and they can do any predictive maintenance around those kind of failure modes and things like that. So we'll go through that while we're working. Our next module is asset library. Here on the left-hand side panel, it's the first time that we've introduced where you now be able to add in asset classifications. So what I mean by that is that you'll have three levels: asset class type, which are the different types of assets within the same asset class group. And then you have a variation under that, which means if you've got a certain variation within the same type of equipment, you can list them in there. If not, you could still put something like generic or things like that. So we'll add in here, let's say, Russia, and the code can be similar to what your CMMS codes are for your class. And in SAP, you have type, which is equivalent to your technical object type. And then I'll add a type under that, and I'll call it Russia Joe. We'll have a code in there as Joe. Again, that can be similar to what your CMMS codes are, because you'll see later how it all connects with the functional locations as well. And I will say for this example process, Pressure Joe generic, and I'll call this GEN, let's say. Now I've got the 3 levels. The asset classification is done. You could also reference ISO 14224, but just be very careful. That's a baseline to understand how you need to build, because a lot of the things in the standards are at high level, and you must understand your business context and your assets to be able to build the asset classifications in the right way. Once that's built, you can see the details of the asset class type and variation in there. And we also have a section here where you could link your functional location so that the library developed RCM data can all be standardized across all the linked functional locations in there. We also have boundary limits to add in that our AI hierarchy generator can take in. So you can put your boundary limits for that particular asset in there so that you can never mix match your assets. For example, a lot of the places that we see in a process environment is that the pipelines and the pumps get mixed in one place, and in another same plant, the pump is separate to the pipeline. So these boundary limits help you to standardize your limits around the asset. And then here we've got AI trained for over 2.5 years on the development of the equipment hierarchies. And this equipment hierarchy is not the same as functional location hierarchy. This is pretty much, in simple sense, a breakdown of an asset to its component level down in a functional breakdown perspective. So it kind of works from a perspective that you've got an asset. What are the major assemblies, sub-assemblies, maintainable items, and components in a structured manner? So if it finds that it has been trained on a certain asset, it'll give you an option based on the data that's in there. And if nothing is in there, then you can create a new variation, and it will help you to build around that using the same learnings it's got from over 150 different asset classes that we've worked around that. So for this example, I'm going to choose something that we already have trained it on, and it will now start generating hierarchy in here. So we've got extension view here that will show us that it starts building hierarchy and gives us to the component level down. We've got the opportunity to view level by level. So what level you want to collapse by level 2. So you can see the major assemblies or systems within them and so on. You can expand a single node or all the nodes, and you can start looking at how it's broken down, and you've got an opportunity to then delete, add, edit, name, things like that, the way you'd like to make your hierarchy work. And we've got them in 3 different views, which are here on the top. We've got the top down that we're currently seeing. We've got the left to right view, if anyone prefers that. And we've got a table view for people who love Excel in here. And this gives you the last leaf or the node item at every row level to be able to see how the hierarchy structure has been built in this case. And within Within the hierarchy, we've also got, if you feel that the hierarchy is too dense, you've got searching capability, and you can use that and it will center whenever it finds a similar name within the hierarchy so that you can have a review and look at it. So once that's done, then based on the hierarchy, it is then able to translate that hierarchy on the left panel so you don't miss or remove any duplicates of same maintainable items, and it ensures that it respects its assemblies and sub-assemblies in there so that the users get a clear idea where each maintainable items are. What you would see here also is that the AI functionality has also been trained to understand how the functions and functional failures of maintainable equipments need to be generated. So these will be generated automatically for you so that the engineers do not have to write each one of them individually. Let's assume it's a greenfield ops readiness project that can take too long. Instead, the user can just review and change whatever is required. They can come on the left-hand side here. You'll see an edit button. You can then enter your own function, add extra functions in there, and work your way through. Once that's done, and then again coming from the hierarchy, all the components or the last levels then gets the failure and task analysis level of detail, where you will have the component name, and it's broken down the failure mode into the first principles of failure mode with component name, failure mechanism, and the cause of the failure. Again, these will be auto-generated using our AI agent in the backend, and you will have most of the data related to failure modes, effects, criticality analysis, and RCM-based primary tasks. These are all the different attributes related to primary task, pair type, equipment, task interval, operating status, compliance, risk management, and then we have the corrective task attributes similar to your primary tasks. And you will see that it's got all the details related to a full-blown RCM. And the best part is that it will auto-populate and it will help the users to then just review and change where it's required. Now, similarly with the maintainable equipment, the components details can be changed in the left-hand panel. By clicking on the edit button, you will see the failure mode, first failure mode in here. And then you've got the failure mode that is the concatenation of your component, mechanism, and cause. And then you've got an option here to add your failure type. This is a high-level grouping to understand, is it a hidden failure? Is it operational? Is it design? Things like that. And you can add your own name in there, and it will automatically add in the database for your user profile. Then you've got your local effects, system level effect, the risk metrics that we built for every consequence on the top, and the different colors that you could change, and then have your detectability levels in there. Once chosen in there, you get your RPN and a summarized table to let you know what everything looks like. So if I put this here, and then health and safety, medium and high detectability. So based on those examples, it'll give you a judgment over here on the unmitigated risk or the failure modes risk. What are there to consider? Sometimes when you don't have that visibility, we end up making incorrect decision and tend to move into a normalized task development that may not generate any value. So these kind of things are small details, but really helps in development of right maintenance strategy. Then you've got the risk assessment notes. Anything around the risk assessment that you need to add in there, you can always add in there. This becomes your knowledge and details and any decision-making criteria that you've got to be registered in here so that the knowledge isn't left on someone's mind and doesn't leave the door when the engineer or the person working on this leaves. So once that's done, and then on the left, we've got the task, maintenance task box in here, where we've got primary task and corrective task. And here you could add in all the value for the acceptable limits. We've got options to either add text, images, or tables as required. And then for work instruction, you either say yes or no if it's required. And then the work type, generally auto-generated based on the primary task. What type of work is it? Replace, repair. Your intervals, operating status, task interval units, any compliance. Does this task need to be bundled by itself because it might be very complex task like a big gearbox on a vertical roller mill, where you have a primary task as replace gearbox and you want to bundle it by itself, then it's a yes, otherwise it's no. The cost type, OPEX or CAPEX pretty much, and then mitigated risk, again, similar. Once you've had a primary task developed or a mitigating action developed for the failure mode, and then you go and choose your mitigated risks, and it'll show you in the bottom what mitigated risks you've got in there. And once that's all set up with resources, spares, equipment and tools, everything set up, you've kind of built your library in here so that you can now then standardize across all your functional locations. We'll move on to the next module in here now. So what I'm going to do for the next module, which is another functionality that I'd like to show you, is that I'm going to delete this asset classification right now that we built. And in the asset strategy, I have currently got a load file that I've already populated. And I will show you in a second. So within the functional location load file that has been populated, which is pretty similar to most of your CMMS data that you would see. So if you look at the asset info section, you've got your parent functional location, ID, name, functional location, the status of that functional location, sort fields, tag IDs, serial numbers, anything that you can bring in from your existing CMMS, you can bring in. And we've got asset class codes, names, type codes, type name, variation code, variation name. And you would see that when that data is available when you load in your functional locations, the box turns green, telling us that there is a library information available within this functional location. And then it would detect that that is the main asset level, and the lower levels are the child functional location levels. Now, when we loaded this, because it had all this data in here, what it did in that instance was that it went back into asset library and it auto-developed for you your asset class, type, and variation. And within the variation, you would see that it also auto-linked your functional locations. Now, when we go through the same process here again, with the equipment hierarchy, the jaw crusher developed. And the functional analysis is being developed. And the failure and task analysis is currently developed. Okay. So now, once your functional locations have been linked, what this module also does is that it also provides you a library style functional location templates so that it can help you to standardize when you bring in a new functional location of your asset, and it will then help you standardize in the asset strategy library your functional locations as well, so that you do not have in one place where a crusher is missing a particular level and then in another one it's got more than what it's required. So it consolidates all the child levels of your functional locations, and it helps to standardize within the asset strategy level. So moving on to the asset strategy now, in here, what you've got an option now is that you are now in the module where you are working for every asset specific. So for Crusher 1, you look into your hierarchy. If there is anything that you feel that is not part of this hierarchy, you can go into the equipment hierarchy tab and start deleting that is not part of Crusher 1. Or if there is something that's not listed within the library and you feel that you need to add an extra item in here, simply go to the parent level under which you want to have that name or a child. You add a child there, you write a name in there, and if anything matches to the database, it will look for a similar name for you to choose so that you can standardize the name and reuse pretty much the data from the database. So this is helping you to standardize your data at the same time. So if I'm going to add, it's just taking a bit of time, but it will give you the suggestion, will provide you to show you electric motor and all the related components underneath it. Sorry, I'm just going to add in a bearing for now. And when you add in, what this does is that because it's linked to the asset library to a single variation in all these functional locations, when you add something in one, it automatically picks up and asks you 3 questions. Do you only want to add this part under these functional locations, or do you want to standardize it and add it to all functional locations that are linked to the same variation? Or do you want just a specific functional locations where you could add, and you could say 3, 5, and 6. So you're not doing the same adding tasks across multiple functional locations separately. You could do it through just one click over here, and you can add that node in there. Similarly, if you want to delete a particular node or a section out of it, the same approach is being developed within. So when you want to delete this, you again get the same prompt. Do you want to delete from the current functional location only, or all the functional locations, or specific functional locations, where one might have or few might have an extra temperature sensor that you might want to add them in, and you just do it from one functional location, and it'll help you to add in the remaining. And then the remaining process are pretty similar to asset library, except that there'll be few extra columns because these are asset specific functions now, and the maintainable equipment will again have the function, but now you can see that it's got extra parameters that need to be added specific to that particular asset, lower limits, upper limits, and everywhere you'll see across the software that there are notes being put in, have been added in, so that the knowledge can be captured, decision-making capabilities can be captured, and nothing lives out of your company, and everything's documented in here. Again, for the functional locations, you can go in there, edit as you require, and add extra functions as you desire. We've also got editing the name, where if you've got multiple of access letters and you want to probably duplicate them, you might want to have an access letter on the left. And when you update that, let's wait for it to get it updated. And then you might want to duplicate and have a write as well. And what that does is then it will duplicate all the components and all the data that are similar to the left or the original one. And technically what it's doing is that it's maintaining the library name so that it can revert back into the asset library section. And when it goes back and consolidates into the asset library, that becomes your place for governance to check and understand if there are any further opportunities to standardize any data or naming and things like that. Here we go. We've got the access ladder left and access ladder right, and all the components are duplicated with all the data as well. So if I go to the right, the function that comes in will be the same as what's on the left. Similarly, when I get into failure and task analysis, and the blue boxes are your components. As you can see, there are toggle buttons to edit um, the failure modes or change the name, or even if you want to duplicate similarly to the way we did for maintainable item, you can also duplicate the component underneath the maintainable item. So in the edit function, similar to what we saw in the library, we've got the failure mechanism cause. And if you feel at this point that there should be an extra failure mode or something, or the ones coming from the library, some of them are not required, you can always delete one by one and make this specific for that particular asset at that location to its own operating context. And so then, and finally, you have the failure modes that are actually specific, but still within the library, it's all consolidated data in there and ensuring that you've got the right maintenance strategy developed at the functional location level for the specific asset in there. And one thing that, the other thing that comes in here in the asset strategy level is that we have failure rates that you can enter with units, MTBFs that you can enter with units, and the new thing that we've put in here, which is going to be part of our next development process, is that the users can choose that based on this failure mode, the failure modes, the effects, up to what level within the plant, at the process, sub-process, or area, or an entire site level, what will fail if this failure mode and effects come into the place. And then the users can say, we will have environmental effect, or the whole crushing line is going to stop, and things like that. Now, this is another place where you could then document your knowledge and experience around the failures, not living just at the failure mode and effect level, but also gives a picture to the management, what can happen. So all this data will be part of the next development phase, where we'll have risk and hazard registers for the management team to have a bird's eye view to understand where the risks are, where they can help the teams, and things like that. So I won't go into much detail into that at now. And then similarly, again, you've got your risk matrices that you can specifically then assign your consequences, likelihood, and detectability, and your notes as relevant for that particular analysis. Then for the primary task and corrective task, again, nothing different, similar feature, extra things that comes in place for asset specific. Do you have any PF interval to enter that you might want to enter in there? And then we've got the routed task. Is this a routed task? And the routed tasks are generally the ones where most of the times you do some kind of condition monitoring tasks that are across various different assets. So we've got our assets in this example at functional location level 5s. If you need a routed or a bundle that is above level 5, and you want someone to go and grease multiple motors of various different assets, then you can choose this as a yes, and that will be a separate bundle, which will be seen when we come into the task bundling module, and it will be packaged or bundled at a level higher than an asset, ensuring that it's captured all the routed tasks within the same level that we define. Again, similarly, add your spares and tools. You've got your resource that generally gets auto-built. And from a table view perspective, you've got the same view as what you saw in the edit, and you get an entire spreadsheet, like I would say, overview in here. And everywhere, all the columns, we've got this column settings toggle on the right. So what this does is that you can set up your columns as you wish. You might want to have failure rate coming before, you might want to switch off few different columns that you might not want after you've developed, and you apply those settings, and you will then have the view that you'd like for your user settings. And while you can see everywhere we've got change logs, it will start documenting each and every change that you've done. So it becomes a automated, digitized change management repository that the users can then are then able to take the raw file out, using obviously with our development team's support, and help you to understand if you needed to do any benchmarking or gap analysis from a year where you are to where you are now, things like that. Now, since we've got the asset strategy covered and the functional locations are loaded, we'll go back into the configuration data module. In the configuration, we will now set up our task bundling rules so that we can go to the next module. Here, you will get the options of the functional location status first. This is to ensure that if there are any inactive functional locations for whom you do not need any maintenance plans or items being developed, then that can be unselected. In our example, we've only got the active, so it's selected active. Then the next step is to choose where you would like your maintenance plans being developed. Rule of thumb, generally at the asset level. So we've chosen here functional location level 5. Routed, generally a level above the asset level, but you could also choose level 3 or 2 of that. And then any single task bundling, that would be bundled at the lowest functional location level where the primary task lives or is associated. Then we come to the choice of various different data sets to be grouped into, and this is generally based on how your company's maintenance plans and items are named. So, for example, if I've got a company that has task interval and units, for example, like 12 months, resource type could be work type could be inspect, and operating status could be offline. If that's how your company names, then you simply come and choose. So I'll just for a second delete this and start again. So I've got task interval, I've got resource type, work type, operating status. And if you need to move around them, you can simply drag and drop and move things around. And then based on this rule is how everything within the task bundling rule will be named and grouped. So you set these rules once and you forget, and you will always have a consistent output every time. So when you come to your task bundling, wherever the task bundles would be available, you'll see a green box in there. And this is what this shows is more like a maintenance plan. And then within the plan, you've got your maintenance items, and your items usually have the task intervals or various different task intervals under the same plan. And we will then go to the table format. In the table format, you've then got all the details related to that plan, item, and task list. And Nexaan builds its own plan code and plan names based on the rules, obviously. The names are developed according to that. And you could export all these details and fill up all your CMMS data so that you can align that to Nexaan's numbers and names in here, so that you've always got that history where you could then be able to see if anything changed down the line, what changed in what plan, and you can then reference that back to your CMMS system. So similarly, we've got the maintenance items and task lists. And these are Nexaan generated numbers and names. And then we've got operations for your work orders or task list. The first one generally gets auto-populated or auto-developed, and you can edit the operation number and description, but not the hours or resource or quantity, because these are all linked back to the asset strategy module. And you can also add extra operations to ensure that your planner gets the output that the way they require, or you can simply come back later and add them as required. And then we've got CMMS plan strategy. If you've got one in your company, you can always import that back in. This is a quick view of the primary tasks that are bundled together. Gives you a place where the planner and engineer can engage and understand if the mitigated risk is, let's say, very low. Is it really worth doing the primary task? It's one end line of quality check so that the planner can also question the engineer if required, and ensure that maintenance performed is value adding. The new thing that we've added in here is the maintenance document UI. So you could literally build your entire maintenance document in here with the equipment and tools and spares auto-populated from your asset strategy. For these ones, it wasn't there in this example. And then you can move around with your different tasks and things. The left panel gives you an opportunity to move around the sections. And you can also add a custom section with your name, and then you can add tables in that section. In here, you can put tables the way you like it, or you can come and add your images or documents that you've got in here and load them in here. And you've got a full maintenance document ready that you can export in PDF or Word straight away, along with the details of the maintenance plans, items, and task list that can be exported out of this module for your planners to review. And then all the basic other items in here, it's got estimated costs. So these are the ones where during the setup, if you've got the costs for the labor, spares, equipment, and tools, they all kind of add up with your primary tasks. And it auto sums over here and provides you the estimated cost for that particular maintenance item or task list in there. And then we've got some extra details in here that you can bring in if you'd like to understand what your durations planned are and actual happened, or your start dates are. And again, this field work instruction, yes or no, that helps you to understand whether in your maintenance document you need to add additional photos or instructions or texts to make sure that the work executed is of precision level as required. So once that's done, we come to our final module, which is our USP and the only APM to have a CMMS ready load file style failure codes that can be exported and loaded straight into your SAP CMMS system. And this goes through about 18 different iteration work and using the AI module in the backend to be able to develop your maintenance codes, also rechecks to make sure can it reuse any codes again, your component codes, failure mechanism or damage codes, and cause codes in there, and it will give you a ready exportable template that is SAP compliant output from here. So that's pretty much about it.